our sixth meetup. It's a great pleasure to have Marco Russo today with us.
Hello.
Marco, thanks a lot for accepting our invitation to be with us today. I believe most of you already know Marco. You have attended one of the conferences where he has been, or you have read one of his books. With 2 decades of experience, I think that you have built a great knowledge base for all the Power BI users, and you have helped them quite a lot in their jobs. So it's actually a big pleasure and a big honor for us to have you here today. Would you like to share with us the topic that we will discuss, and maybe also a short introduction from your side?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Marco Russo. I produce content for SQLBI, which is a company that produces educational content training for DAX, data modeling for Power BI and analysis services. And in the last few years, I also worked on a tool that is called DAX Optimizer, which I'm going to show you today. So the idea is to explain how the tool works, but also to answer your question about not only the tool, but also if you have other questions about the DAX optimization. We recently also released a training and a book that will be available by the end of the month that is called Optimizing DAX. So Optimizing DAX is the training, DAX Optimizer is the tool. They are 2 different things, so you could use one without the other. Of course, if you use DAX Optimizer to make your work more productive for the optimization is better. But DAX Optimizer is actually been designed to help both the people who are not expert in DAX and those that are also expert in DAX. And I will show you why it can serve both audiences. Okay.
It's good. Yeah, maybe we can then towards the end, if you have any links for the trainings, the books, or something that we can share also with the audience later on.
Yes, so I can share my screen. So let me go here where I can show the, so 2 things. One is the DAX Optimizer and the other is SQLBI.com, which is the website where you can find the educational part. We have a number of, so we have many articles and content and tools that are free. So if you go in the tools section, you will find many tools that are, a few of them are not produced by us, but we just provide an index to these tools. Other like Bravo are produced by us. Others like DAX Studio are contributed by us in terms of sponsorship, and I also personally in the, contribute to the code of this open source software. And then in the training page, we will find a lot of trainings about DAX and data modeling. So I don't want to spend too much time on the promotion, but SQLBI.com is the place to go for this kind of content. What we're going today, we're going to talk about the DAX Optimizer and trying to look for the web page here. So DAXOptimizer.com is the website where you will find all the commercial information. I don't want to spend time on that part. So you can find everything on the web. My goal is more to look at the technical side, so to understand how it works, to show you the user interface, and to answer your questions. So here you will find all the this is a commercial product, but I would try to explain why this could help you saving time, and also to find problems that you might not be aware of that could hit the performances one day. And for that reason, I have a very short, quick introduction about DAX Optimizer, just to introduce the tool. I don't know if you want to add something before I start. Can I move forward?
For the moment, yes. I mean,
okay.
Just
okay. So because I always so we try to use to maximize to optimize the use of the time also. So DAX Optimizer is a tool that is produced by a company called Tabular Tools. Tabular Tools is a company that is an investment between SQLBI, which is the company that I showed you before, and Tabular Editor, which is the company that produces the Tabular Editor tool that is available as both as a free open source tool and as a commercial product. That version 2 is free and the version 3 is a commercial one that has more features that improve the productivity. So these 2 companies merge the knowledge and code that we've wrote for different tools to produce something new that is actually the result of many years of research and development. And this tool is called DAX Optimizer. So what is DAX Optimizer? Basically, is a tool that, let's say, improves 3 areas. One is the performance of your model. So if you write DAX code, DAX measures in your model, they could be the reason why a model that is not performing well. And so the goal of DAX Optimizer is to find these bottlenecks and also suggest you what to improve. Improve the readability of the code, because DAX Optimizer provides you suggestion about how to modify the code in terms of best practices that you have to use, so that the code becomes more readable also to other people of the team. When you work with a team of different people, having standards could be useful, and that's another area where DAX Optimizer can help. And in general, helps the maintainability of the code over time, which is in a way similar to the second point, because by making the code more readable, it improves the maintainability over time, also by other people. Performance means two things: faster execution and lower memory consumption. The second thing is hidden. Sometimes you have a report that is good, I mean, it's good enough, but you don't realize that it is consuming much memory. So the moment it is used by many users, it slows down the entire tenant. So if you want to avoid that, if you want to, because at that point, the solution is that, oh, you can increase the capacity, but increase the capacity means going, for example, from P1 to P2 capacity means going from $6,000 per month to $12,000 per month. So the unit of increase of the capacity allocation is $5,000 per month, which is $60,000 per year, which is a lot of money. So if we can do something to avoid or delay that moment, it could be better. So the memory consumption of a report is something that sometimes is hidden, is not immediately visible, and is only visible when you have many users that consume the report. And so that is an area where DAX Optimizer can help. As I said, readability, understand the code purpose. You have to write the smaller amount of code possible to make it easier to read and to understand what is the goal of the code. So sometimes the code is unnecessarily complex because maybe you come from a background of SQL where you were used to do to write code in a certain way. And so DAX Optimizer detects these patterns and suggests you to rewrite the code in a different way. It's always up to you to write the code, because you have to, make sure that the results are correct. But if you understand the suggestions, then it makes you very, very productive. And finally, the maintainability, which is, again, if we keep complex code in the model, then it is hard to support. It's hard to support for other people. And so we try to create standards of writing code so that we expect to write a code a certain way if you have to always do the same operation. So having three different versions of the code to do the same thing is not the ideal in order to maintain the model. So this is something I can show you later, because now I want to give you an overview about what is the concept, what is the idea behind DAX Optimizer. So we start from, I'm checking where is the model here. So this is a model, this is a Power BI model that I have. This is a classic contours example we use in many cases. And I will start with the optimization problem, so the performance issue, which is the easiest one to show. And probably many of you know that the first tool that you learn when you have to optimize something is Performance Analyzer, which is something that you have in Power BI. So with Performance Analyzer, you can say, okay, I want to refresh this report, and I want to analyze the time spent by the visuals in this report. And when you have many visuals, you can locate where you have the visual that is more expensive. And in this case, you can see I have only one matrix, which is consuming 8 seconds to return a result. And this 8 seconds is a lot. So this is a model just to let's take a look at the model. So what is the size of the model? The biggest table is sales, and sales has 2 million rows. I don't know if it is visible. Let me open and zoom it. So this is the size of the model, 2 million rows. Sorry, the size of the biggest table is 2 million rows. But if we take a look at the diagram view, in this model, we have a table with a currency exchange. And so we have a currency conversion algorithm to convert the sales in a different currency if the user requires to. Moreover, the model has many measures. If we take a look at the number of measures we have, you see that these are the measures that have been built here. But if I drill down, I will find many other measures for all the time intelligence variations. So we used, in this case, Bravo, but you could have a model that has tens or hundreds of measures to analyze. And so at this point, you could start trying to figure out what you have in this report, what is the measure that is low, and you can use a tool like DAX Studio, which allows you to get a query. So for example, if I go here and I go back in Performance Analyzer and I start a record, refresh the visual, I can capture the DAX query and I can execute the DAX query in an environment like DAX Studio, where I collect additional information about the execution. But this requires a number of skills. So for example, first of all, I have to know that I had to open DAX Studio, I had to paste the code here, I had to click on server timings, click clear on run, and when it is ready, I click run. Second, let me also enable the query plan, because this way I will show you also the query plan, because there are different elements. The query plan describes how the engine planned to execute the query, and the server timings describes the actual execution of the query in terms of, let's say, which data has been requested from the storage engine, because the architecture of DAX has two engines, the storage engine and the formula engine. The storage engine could be different. You could have one storage engine when you import the data, another one when you use direct query, another one when you have a composite model, and so on. And so depending on the situation, the information that you can find here are different. For example, here we see the timeline of the execution that describes where the activities of the storage engine have been executed. And you see that we have 56% of the time that has been consumed in the storage engine and 43% of the time in the formula engine. So it seems we have a problem on both the formula engine and the storage engine, because usually we might have a problem only in one, but in this case we have a problem in both. And if we look at the description of the data here, we see, oh, we have many million rows here, here, and here. And so now we have to, do a number of operations that are required to figure out what is happening. The query plan could help, but if you look at the query plan has 20,000 rows, more operators skip it. So if you want to actually read this information, it takes a while. And we're talking about just one report with just 5 measures. How many measures do we have in the model? Many. So how can we analyze this information? Well, the idea is, if you use a tool like DAX Studio. DAX Studio has this tool, this feature, View Metrics, that shows you the information about the model, the statistics about the number of rows, the size in memory of each table, of each column, and so on. The information that you see here is an information retrieved by a library, a public open source library that is called Vertipack Analyzer. Now, Vertipack Analyzer is a library used by several tools. I show you a second tool that uses the same library, and this tool is called Bravo for Power BI. Bravo for Power BI is another tool that is free and open source, and is designed to be simple to use. So DAX Studio requires a certain skill to be understood. It's a technical tool, whereas Bravo is a tool for the people who don't have a large technical skill or just want to save time in terms of productivity. And you see that the very same information we have seen in that list of numbers in DAX Studio is also available here in Bravo for Power BI. That shows which are the biggest columns of the model, but internally it has access to the same information you have seen before. Indeed, we can save this information in a VPAX file. So let me save this in a cdemo, which is the, demo, DAX Optimizer, one demo. So I don't overwrite something. So I save this file, which is a small file. I will show you in a moment. The very same file could have been saved, I show you, in DAX Studio. DAX Studio has this button, Export Matrix, that saves the same format. So again, we are using a library that is used in Tabular Editor, Bravo for Power BI, and many other tools. Now, the file that I saved doesn't have any data from the model. Let me explain. This is the folder where I saved these files. And you see that we have a number of files, VPAX file that we have. Now, if I rename one of these VPAX files into a zip file, because VPAX is just the extension name, but in reality is a zip file, this file is just a folder that has a number of files that are JSON files and text files. And these files only contain a representation of the metadata of the model. I show you, so if I open this in Visual Studio Code, let me check if I have Visual Studio Code here, and I show you. So 1 second, I just have to, well, I can open the folder and I will move to the right window here. So here we go. So select folder and here. So now we can see in Visual Studio Code the content of these files. And as you see, these files have just a JSON file with a list of columns, a list of strings. In this case, it's a JSON file. But if you look at the content of this JSON file, there is no data. It's just the name of the tables, the name of the columns, the name of the measure, the DAX code of the measures, the number of rows and the number of unique rows in each column. That's it. So, and the relationships. Okay, so we have a logical representation of the model with the same names of the tables and columns and measure that you have, but absolutely no data. So we don't extract any row from the tables of the model. Now, the advantage of this file is that this file is small. So because we only had the metadata, even though my PBX file with all the data is like almost 50 megabytes, the corresponding VPAX file is 44 kilobytes. So it's just 0.1% of the original file. Now, this file can be sent by email to someone else or can be sent to a service that analyzes the model and evaluates what to do. Now, the difference is the following. I'm not going to optimize one report. I'm going to provide a model to a service that will analyze the model. It's like it performs a assessment of the model. Marco, can you review my model and let me know if there is something I can improve? That's exactly what DAX Optimizer is going to do. Analyze the entire model, all the measures of the model. And so what happens once I use DAX Optimizer? Now we can go to the website. So this is a web page where you can find all the commercial information. But when you log in, you enter into this page, which is a web app, where you have your own environment. Now, we use the same terms that we have in Power BI, like workspace. But in reality, the idea is that you have this area where you can work and upload the VPAX files of your model. So the statistical extraction of information of your model, which is something that I did here. As you see, we have this contoso currency conversion, which is the file that I have shown you. I'm just trying to save time. Instead of uploading the file and showing you all the process, I just show you the end result. Now, before you say, Marco, but I would like to try. Well, if you try to create an account to the platform without asking any credit card or anything, and so for free, you can get an account and you can enter into an area of the product where you have this sample walkthrough, where you have the same information I'm going to show you in read-only mode, which means that you can see the result of the analysis that I will explain in a moment. You will not have the features to, let's say, to write or to run a new analysis, because that is the part that is the, subject to the payment of a service. So let's go to my workspace here. So I show you what I prepared. So for example, let's say that I created this model. I uploaded this VPAX file and I created this in my workspace. My workspace is like my area that I'm not able to share, because if I create a workspace, I can share the result of the analysis with other people of my team. So the first time I upload this model, what happens is that I have here, just in a few minutes, usually the time required between I upload my model, I get the result is less than 5 minutes, but usually 1-2 minutes. That's the average time we have today. And we have the information that we extracted from the VPAX file, that just a recap, as a recap of what we have. We have 8 tables, 78 columns, 61 megabytes for the database, 151 measures. So just keep in mind, we are sending a model without saying to the DAX Optimizer which measures I will use in my report. Because the point is that we are going to optimize the entire model. I know that my report has some issue, but let's see what happens. So at this point, I run the analysis and I get this other section where you see 12 open issues that is telling me, well, this model has issues and there is something you can do to optimize the model. The model is already optimized for RAM and CPU, but there is still something that you can do. And so if I go to the issues here, I can see the issues that have been detected to my model. Now, in this case, I have only 9, but I will show you later a real model because, of course, we're looking at a demo I prepared where I can explain step by step what happens. But then I will show you a real model obtained by a customer that authorized us to show in public. And so you will understand that when you have a real model with hundreds of issues, it's important to understand where do I start from? Because if I have a very long list of issues, I will not do anything because I say, okay, there is too much. So I don't have time to even just read at these issues. I will just give up. But if I know that out of these 9 issues, 2 of them are way more important than other, this relevance is like a score that is important in a relative way. So we don't have to look at the number by itself because also the number, if you look at the real number is 43 billion, right? But we always normalize the number so that it is easy to read and you just have to look at the difference in terms of orders of magnitude. So these 2 issues are 6 times 600 100 times more important than the third one. So it's clear that we should focus on these 2 issues because these issues have been identified on a measure, sales amount, that has a huge impact on all the other measures of the model. And this is a way to view the problem. So if I click on this context transition iterator, I can see this issue has a description, has a number, a more detailed description of the issue, a number of examples about how I could rewrite the code in order to remove the issue. And of course, we provide several examples because we're not sure about what you want to do, but we've shown different examples because we want to make you understand what are the possible different operations that you could do for that to solve this problem. And as you see, in this case, I can easily identify the exact line of the code where this issue happened. Now I'm looking at the issue. So for this type of issue, content transition iterator, we have 5 measures that are affected. Now, usually this is a way to, because when you have a certain way of writing the code, you usually repeat the same technique in multiple measures. But another way to look at the problem is to go to the measures view. And let me show you the simple view. So in the simple view, we just look at this index, the relevance. And you see that those 2 issues that are more important are in the same measure. So if I look at the measure, I see that the measure sales amount has 2 problems. And these 2 problems are, number 1, 74% of the importance for this measure. Number 2, 26% of importance for this measure, which means that not only I know the priority in general, but within a measure, I can also figure out the priority within that measure. So I can focus and spend my time on the more important issue first, because it's the one issue that affects more the code. Let's take a look at this particular issue. This particular issue in this example is I'm writing for each row in the sales table, I'm computing the row amount in sales only for the rows in sales where sales quantity is greater than 0. Now, if I look at the description of the problem, I will find that this is a problem using an if statement in an iterator, which is the description here, which is commonly made by code written this way. This is not the same code I have, but it's very close. If you look at the code, it's the same pattern. And so if you look at this code, instead of writing the code this way, you could consider rewriting the code this way, because probably you wanted to do something that could be expressed in a more efficient way in DAX. The code that you see in the possible optimization is what we call DAX-friendly code. It's code that is, let's say, better optimized by the engine. And this is just an example. And of course, this is not the only issue we have in this code. If we take a look at the context transition iterator, we have another problem here. The invoking a measure, iterating a table is expensive. So usually this could be a problem. We always have to evaluate whether this is actually what we want to do, or do we have another way to do this? Now, if we look at the content of this measure, so why do we call a measure for each row in sales? Sometimes you have to drill down to understand what is going on. Now, in this case, I'm just multiplying quantity by net price, and I'm summing sales. But at this point, if I look at the code, why do I have a measure here? At the end of the day, we have sales. For each row, we have a context transition that will filter only one row in sales. And for that row, we multiply 2 columns. Probably I could just get this code and put this code here. Or if I rewrite the SumX solving the SumX, if I solve this problem, I remove the SumX at all, because if you look at the code that is suggested here, I'm removing the iterator. And if I remove the iterator, I will get calculate, measure with the key filter with the predicate. And so if I write the code this way, I remove the 2 problems at once. So that's the reason why you always have to look at the measure, because when you have to modify the code, you could remove one problem, but maybe also another one. So you always have to look at the content as a whole. So at this point, what happens? Let's say that, okay, first of all, out of 150 measures, the engine found that this measure is the more important one to optimize. How is it possible that it knows that my measure is also used in that report? It doesn't know that, but statistically, it's very likely to happen. If you want to take a look at this, at how the engine worked to find this, you can enable an expert view that provides you additional information about the measure that we are looking at. So, for example, here you see that the explanation of this relevance is the following. The measure sales amount by itself doesn't have a large CPU cost or RAM cost alone. If you look at the margin currency, it is much more expensive. However, the number of execution of this measure by other measures is 112 million, which means that sales amount, because sales amount is invoked in other iterators, at the end of the day, it will be invoked many times, and that's the reason why it is so expensive. So sometimes you have a measure that by itself will not be a big issue, but the moment it's invoked by many other measures, the importance explodes. And you can see this also because the number of direct references and indirect references is large. So we have only 3 direct references, but indirect references means that there is so imagine that you have a measure that calls this amount, that is a direct reference. So if the measure A calls sales amount is a direct, for example, the measure margin calls sales amount for sure. But if another measure calls margin that calls sales amount, that is an indirect reference, because the other measure that calls margin internally calls sales amount. So if you look at what happens, so sales amount is one of those basic measures that is used by many other measures. And if there is a performance issue there, it propagates everywhere. And that's the reason why it's so important in this case. So at this point, let's say that we say, okay, now think about this. I uploaded the model in 1 minute. I know where to put my hands to get the maximum impact. And I edit the code. Where do I edit the code? In your editor, in Power BI Desktop, in Visual Studio, in a Tabular editor, whatever the editor you use, you continue to use that editor. But you might want to say, well, now I fixed this code, right? So now I know that this code has been fixed, so I could skip this. So sorry, I'm in the wrong place now because this is inactive. Yes, I inactivated this one. So let me think if I can activate now. Because now it's in read-only mode, and so probably let's see if I have in test here a version that I can modify. This one is active. Okay, perfect. So I think that I have a similar visualization here because I wanted to show you this user interface. Let's remove this one moment. So let's say that this is the code that I decided to fix. and I say, okay, I fix this code. I fix this issue, the sum x, for a sales amount because I modified the code in Power BI Desktop. By clicking this fixed, I'm informing the model that now this problem has been fixed. I don't want to show this problem again in the future, which means that when I go back to this list, I can just show the issues that have to be fixed. For example, this issue could be something that I say, okay, I know this is expensive, but I want to ignore it. What is the difference? Ignore will hide this line just like fixed, but the difference is the following. Let's say that I continue to fix these problems for the first and more important issues. Then I probably say, okay, now I want to check whether my changes actually improve the performances. So I will create a new version of the VPAX file and I will upload that version to the model. At that point, any issue that I declared as fixed has to be checked again. So I declare as fixed, which means that is no longer, I want to remove from the list of the things to do for this version, but in the next release, I want to check it again. Because if it is true that I fixed it, it should disappear because it should not be there anymore. If I decided to ignore an issue, is because I accept the cost of that, let's say, issue, because I don't have another way to write the code. I actually want to spend so much time. I don't have any alternatives. Sometimes we always prefer to report a false positive. So we prefer to report an issue that is not an issue rather than the opposite. If we have to make a choice between a false positive and a false negative, we always prefer a false positive. Okay, there is a warning. No problem. That's okay. If I had something that could be dangerous, that would be way worse because actually I will not be able to see a potential issue. So when we have a dubbed, we always prefer to report something rather than hide something. But of course, you may decide, no, it's good as is, and you ignore it. If you ignore a measure, if you ignore an issue in a measure, in the next version, we will not show that issue again if the measure didn't change. So if the measure is the same, we don't report it. But if you made a change to the measure and you changed just one comment, we will not report it because the code is still the same. If you made a change that changed the structure of the code and not just the format or the comments, then we analyze the measure again. Because if the change that you made could have changed the structure of the code, then we want to analyze it again. Because even though you mark it as ignored, the change that you made could generate a different issue. So at this point, ideally is a loop that continues. And just to show you what happens, so if I go in, let me go back to this example where I have the version 2. So for example, if you look at what happened in version 2, we had 12 open issues. Then I fixed a few issues. I ran the analysis again, and I went down to 8 open issues. At that point, I continue to iterate. And so sooner or later, you might want to analyze the actual performance of your report. But again, you have to, so the idea is that we don't optimize a single report. We optimize the model. As an outcome, it's likely that if you have a slow report and you have a problem in the model, probably the problem in the model is generating also the slow report. We actually don't have a way to prioritize. So if you have, let's say, hundreds of measures and you have one report that you want to optimize, we don't actually look for the measure that impact your specific report. Because the idea is that we prefer to optimize the model first. If you have a problem in a specific measure, you can always go to the list of the measures and look for a specific measure. But again, you have to remember that a measure could invoke other measures. So that is an analysis that you still have to do if you want to optimize a single report. But believe me, yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. We have one question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You can also read it. After fixing an issue, do we have to take care of Gaussian in order not to have a biased result? No,
so that's an interesting question. Once again, DAX Optimizer doesn't execute the code. DAX Optimizer doesn't have access to your data. DAX Optimizer performs what is called a static analysis of the model. So we get the model, all the measures. Imagine you send me the model, you send me the statistics of the model, and I look at the model and I tell you, oh, look, potentially this is an issue, potentially this is an issue, potentially this is an issue. What DAX Optimizer does more than I could be able to do, it analyzes all the measures of the model in a short amount of time, and it evaluates, it estimates the cost in CPU and RAM of each possible execution of your code. And that is what it generates. So we don't execute the code. That's the point. When I've shown you the approach using DAX Studio, which is this one, when I've shown you the server timings, when you use DAX Studio, yes, you have to clear the cache and run again. But when you use DAX Studio, you're using a tool that is providing a real-time diagnostic about one report. When you use DAX Optimizer, you send like your blood exam to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you could have these problems, okay? And you could do the, actually it does much more than that, but let's say 90% of the times, we identify problems that can severely affect your report. And so, and I will show you in a moment, I will show you a real use case where actually the report, the problem we found is actually the problem for one report. But the idea is that DAX Optimizer can be used to solve a performance issue that you already had. But the goal is to avoid the performance issue to happen and to hit the user at all. We don't want a user to report a performance issue and then you have to spend time trying to optimize the code. We want to optimize the code up front. We want to detect a potential issue before it happens. And we prioritize that because we want to spend your time on the more important and effective measure that you can optimize, rather than spending the time randomly on issues that don't have any impact on your reports. As I said, we are not 100% sure that we will optimize the report you are concerned about. So when you use DAX Optimizer to optimize a specific report, you should try to figure out whether is the measure at the top of the list invoked in a direct or indirect way by the report you want to optimize, because maybe that you have to go to the second, third place. In my experience, though, the top 10 issues that you have in a model are those that are likely to impact any report that has bad performances. So that's the experience I had with tens, hundreds of customers we already assisted with this tool. So I'm saying DAX Optimizer cannot find anything or everything, but is a huge help to understand what is going on and to actually don't spend time on something that you could figure out in an automated way. Think about this. If I receive a model today from a customer, I don't even open it. First of all, I run in DAX Optimizer to see all the basic things that it can find. And sometimes it can find also complex things, by the way. But I want to spend time only on things that DAX Optimizer cannot find. So if I still have an issue after we applied all the suggestions and we fixed all the issues reported by DAX Optimizer, I know that it's a serious issue. It's not something I will solve in 5 minutes. It will take hours because it's probably a very complex problem to solve. Whereas for many things, if even those things that DAX Optimizer finds in 1 minute, I would spend 1 to 3 hours to identify each one of those issues, because it's not that I open the code and I say, oh, this is to fix, this is to fix. When I open a measure, I could say that, but when you have hundreds of measures, how do you prioritize them? How do you say this is more important than something else? And in order to explain that, I want to show you a real model that we obtained from a customer that gave us the authorization to show the model. And I want to show this. So this is a model of a company that is in real estate. This is a real model. So we received the model and we ran DAX Optimizer. I never seen, not even the diagram view. Okay, so I don't know. This model is 4 gigabytes, 100 tables, 600 measures, and 1,404 columns. There are 113 open issues. And look, what I'm going to show you is not an issue that is, let's say, identified by DAX Optimizer in terms of example to solve it. But just the fact that DAX Optimizer is able to find this issue is huge. Let me show you. So here, because we hidden here, but so let's go to this one. The first problem is this one, context-sensitive iterator. And if we look at the measures, the measure that had the biggest impact is this one, is number of units moved in within 30 days. Remember, this is real estate. So let's take a look at the measure, because the measure speaks by itself. So this measure has the much bigger impact over the entire model. We know that is invoked by many other measures. And within this measure, there are 2, 4, 6 similar issues. The first one has an impact on 96% of the cost of this measure. So it's clear that out of 600 measures, I have to focus my attention on line 14 of this measure. So just the fact that I'm here now after 1 minute is invaluable, because I would have spent hours just to understand that the problem is here. Then I look at the code, and the code says, oh, you have a context-sensitive iterator problem, which means that this measure is called too many times. Remember, we've never seen this model before, but we know that we're talking about real estate. So let's take a look at what this code is doing. We are creating here, we have these add columns are iterators. We have summarize, which is creating the list of the unit key and building key. Unit status, what is? Unit status is a table that probably has the current status, the current situation of a unit. This is a company that is in real estate. They have many units, many buildings, many apartments, and they rent these apartments. And the people who get the apartment, that rents the apartment, are resident, right? So there is a table resident and there is a table units. Oh, fine. So if you think for a moment, for each unit, let's say you have 10,000 units, and for each resident, let's say you have 10,000 residents, you call this table, this measure move-ins. So you're calling this measure 100 million times. Now, think for a moment. What's the point of computing a measure, which is always expensive? Context transition iterator says, we are doing a context transition, we are an iterator, it's expensive. Can we reduce this number? But if you think for a moment, it's impossible that 10,000 residents visited 10,000 units. It's not sustainable. Usually in each unit, in each apartment, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 residents. So if we reduce the list of residents that we visit to only those residents that visit the unit status, the unit at least once, and probably in the model there is a table to do that. When I asked the customer, I said, oh yes, we can use this table. Then this will be reduced by several orders of magnitude, maybe 4 orders of magnitude. And this will basically kill the importance of this issue. We have the same issue at line here, at line 22. But why this is less important? Why this is 96% and this one is 4%? Because now instead of iterating by resident, we are iterating by building. Now, once again, it's the same issue. Why do you iterate all the buildings? Why when one unit can be only in that building? It's impossible that the unit moves to another building, right? So it's just one. Why you're doing that? It's useless. But again, if you ask to iterate all the buildings for all the units, DAX will do that because you asked that. So the fact that you identify this problem in the code, which could be just you're right, I just a distraction. It could be a distraction, but this is hugely important. And to me, the value of having a tool that also identify the problem without us, because I don't have an example that shows me how to fix this code. Okay, I don't have that. But just the fact that I spent 1 minute to find the problem, that's invaluable. It saves me a lot of time. And actually, I didn't even realize that this measure was so important for the entire model, because maybe I was focusing on another measure. This is typically the measure that is at the bottom and called by the measure. So if you look at the report, you think that the problem is the high-level measure that you have in the report, while in reality, it could be a measure that is at the bottom of a chain of execution. So that's exactly what another way to use DAX Optimizer. So yes, I'm looking at the issues, I'm looking at the suggestions, but in reality, there are cases where the code, I don't have an example of how to fix the code, but just the fact that I can focus on the line that is the source of the performance issue, it's absolutely something that makes me way more productive. And then, of course, I can optimize the code starting from that. Any questions so far before? Because I could continue to talk for hours and hours. So I just want to make sure I don't have any. If you have any question, because I can also show you a few other things, but this is already something that is important. And as I said, you can also go in the walkthrough, and in the documentation you have many steps to explain what are the operations that you can do, and many other details that I'm not showing now. So any question? No?
Maybe from my side, regarding the versions that you have, can we compare also versions, or is just adding versions?
So that's another, okay, so that's an interesting question. So you see that we keep track of the version, which means that when you look at the when you look at an issue, I don't remember if we have an example here, but when you look at an issue that has been fixed in a later version, you can see that in probably not in this example. I don't remember, not here, but so there is something that we report as fixed in a later version if it has been fixed. So that is something that we do. But in general, we let's say one idea we have, assuming that it is used enough, is that we could provide the statistics of the how much you fix, how much you lower the number of issues compared to how many new issues you find, because over time, so you might fix a few issues, but in the meantime you could write new measures, you insert new code that could have new issues. So that's something that we could have the data to report that. We just don't have any embedded report. So we have to decide whether we want to create some internal report or we want to provide data that you can, import and create your own report. That's we have the data potentially. We just have to understand what to do. We have a minimal number of things now, and so let's say that at the moment, what you can see easily is the difference at the high level of what is what you still have to fix or not. That's the biggest analysis that you do. But you can always go back to another version and see what was the code before fixing the code. So that is the level. But of course, we have the data, so we could. That's an area of improvement for future releases. And I see also another question, which is, I understand the tool is not backwriting. That's correct. So we don't have access to the data. We don't have access to the model. We are working on a set of data that have been extracted. Not only that, let's say that because we're using a cloud system. So the idea is that you are always responsible for writing the code. We provide suggestion, but you have to write the code. You have to actually maintain the code. We don't take the responsibility because actually also when we provide a suggestion, you always have to figure out whether the code that is suggested is valid. Let me explain. Sometimes in the suggestion, there is some statement that says, if you can make this assumption, then you can write the code this way. Maybe the 95% of the times you can make that assumption, but 5% of the times you cannot. So we cannot decide instead of you. So you know the model, you know which assumptions are correct or not. So one thing that I wanted to show though is the following. If you understand how the system works, at a certain point, I have to do something like this. So I go, for example, if I say I have a new version for the model, or for example here, I have a new version of the model. I click on this button and I upload a VPEX file. Okay. Now this file is sent to the cloud. And so technically what I'm doing, I'm sending a file that has the name of the measure that is margin currency, sales currency, and inside margin currency, I have the code of the measure. Now, let's say that for some reason, you think that the content of the measure is already too sensitive. Just the name of the table or the name of the column or the comment that you have in the code is something that you don't want to move to the cloud anywhere. Now, we keep the data safe. I mean, the data is stored for you, but of course, you are relying on a service of an external company. If you have this problem, so if you say, no, we cannot provide to a third party, this code is too sensitive, we don't trust, I don't know, whatever reason. One option we have is the obfuscation tool, which is this. So at the moment is a command line tool. This command line tool can transform the file, the VPAX file, into two files. For example, this VPAX file has been transformed into these two files. The obfuscated VPAX is a file that I can send to the model, and the dictionary, sorry, is not this one, is these two. So these two, the original VPAX file has been transformed into a VPAX obfuscated and into a dictionary. Now, dictionary is, so what is an obfuscated file? It's easier if I show you. Let's see if I have an example of that. I think that I have in test here obfuscated this one. So this is the same model that we have seen before, so far, but as you see, now all the measures have a completely random name. And if I enter the measure, you see that all the names within this measure changed. Of course, we still have calculate, summate, summarize, because the functions in DAX have to be the same. But the code has been completely transformed. We cannot modify names as date because that will break other things. But 99.9% of the table names, column names have been transformed into, let's say, random strings. But of course, these, let's say, random strings have to be consistent. So this table name has to be the same here. This column name has to be the same here, and so on. Because from the point of view of DAX Optimizer, as long as the model is consistent, we don't care about the exact name. It could be 1, 2, 3, it doesn't matter. But this makes the code unusable. If the purpose of the obfuscation was to hide the table names, comments, and something like that, now you have completely random names. And how do we transform these random names into readable names? So the dictionary file that we extracted with the obfuscator is something that you have to keep by yourself. So you don't have to send this to the cloud. You keep in your machine, in your secret safe place. We don't know. When you receive this file, what you do, you click on this button, and this button is using the local area of the browser. So it's basically not using anything on the cloud, but in a future release will be a local tool without the browser that will work locally. So you provide the dictionary file to this button, and once you provide the dictionary, you can see the names completely transformed, completely readable. So let me see if I have the right dictionary for this example. I think is this one. So I move the dictionary file here, I deobfuscate, and now, okay, this one is probably, I probably don't have the right one here. Let's try this one, V2. Oh, V2 is this one. So let me just try this one again. Hopefully I have the right one. Just I wanted to show you what happens at this point. And here we go. Now we see that the names are readable. This can be read, but if I close the browser and open the browser again, because we use this locally, this will become obfuscated again. You can decide to use the local cache of the browser. So if your computer is safe, you can decide to store the dictionary on the local cache of the browser, so that you don't have to provide it every time. But that's another option we have to keep your data secure if you think that it is a requirement. It creates some friction, I would say, because every time you have to, deobfuscate something. But in case there is an additional level of security needed, that is also an option that you have. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So I will go back to the slide just to do a quick recap. So basically, the idea is that we extract the VPAX file from the model. The VPAX file contains only measures, statistics, the model itself with the relationships. We perform an analysis, we evaluate the issues, we modify the code, we deploy the changes to the model, and then we started the cycle again, because we probably don't fix all the issues. We fix a few issues, then we deploy, then we transfer, we add other measures, and this is like a continuous process. So we envision this becoming part of the development cycle. So it's like something that you want to test it to make sure that your model is in a good health, because you don't want to have issues, you don't want to have bottlenecks in your code. So that's something that we are making sure that you have. So let me check if I have here this one. So let me restore the slide. So the idea is that you can think to DAX Optimizer as a medicine for emergency, because you have a slow report, you want to optimize it, but is also, and more, I think is more importantly, is a preventive tool that helps you to keep the DAX code in good shape. So the slide that I have here is a little bit old, because I prepared this slide before the general availability. Now it is generally available. We released the product a few weeks ago at the end of March. So now the product is generally available, and it includes all these features like the model anonymization, the obfuscation, the ability to create groups and to share the license in a team. So you can buy a license and you can use the license for a group of people in the same company for the same number of models, which was a feature that we didn't have when we were in beta, but now we released all the features. So now we are in GA. And you can, now just talking very quickly, because maybe there are questions about that. Let me open the page with the pricing. So I explain how this works from a pricing perspective. So the idea is that you can just run one analysis, and a single run costs $45 until the end of the month, $36. And this is a cost that doesn't depend on a number of measures. So clearly it's more expensive for a model that has only 10 measures, but probably if you have 10 measures, you don't need to use it. It doesn't, the more measures you have, the better, because actually you spend only once. However, if you think that you will repeat the analysis of the same model multiple times, then you could get a subscription where for 1 month you spend only $69, and you can do 20 analyses per day, up to 5 models that can be active for 1 month. So you can change the model after 1 month, but for 1 month you always analyze the same 5 models. So that is a huge saving, because if you do 20 analyses per day on 5 models, it would be like $700 per day. So actually you spend $50 per month. And this is when you extract the data from Power BI Desktop. Then from Power BI Service is slightly more expensive, even though it's still a fraction of the cost for the consumption. And if you want to go to the enterprise level, to the enterprise license, you basically remove the limit of the number of runs per day, which could be useful when you have a large group that uses the same models. But otherwise, that is, as we say here, the more popular choice, because it's actually the more convenient price for the analysis you want to do. If you have more than 5 models, of course, you can choose a larger number of models that you want to have in the same license. I didn't mention that we deployed also the service in different regions, and you can choose in which region to store your data. So for example, here, let me check if I have the information here. For example, now I'm connected to East United States, but I could switch the region. So I could have multiple, with the same account, I could have workspaces in different regions. And the license that you can buy is associated to one region. So if you have, if you work in a multinational company with data in Australia, data in the United States, data in Europe, you should allocate one license for each region. But otherwise, you just choose the region. And usually, when you create the account, we automatically choose the region that is closest to your country. So usually the default is already what you probably want 90% of the times.
Okay. All the features available for all kind of level subscription, like for example, application, or I don't know, any other kind of feature.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Can you repeat?
Yeah, I was saying, are all the features available for any kind of level of subscription, like obfuscation or?
Yes. 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 Now I understand the question. Thank you. So the feature that you have seen today are available for all the levels. The only feature that will not be that is a feature that we didn't release yet. The only feature that will not be available in levels below the enterprise is the what's the name? The authentication with service principal. let's say that you want to create a pipeline where you automate the deployment, and as part of the deployment, you want to run an analysis. So you want to create a system that automatically runs the analysis every time you apply a change. That that kind of feature is not available yet. It's something that we will release not soon in terms of weeks, but in a few months. And is what correspond to this automation. Automation means the ability to automate the process of the analysis so that it is part of your pipeline. If you have DevOps integrated with Power BI deployment, it's a very advanced feature. So few companies at the moment have this kind of automation, but we expect this this kind of technique to grow in the future, and so we want to be ready when there will be demand for it. So that's a feature we already planned and will be released later.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Some water. Okay. No questions.
Okay, yeah. If there's no other question, I also checked the chat. There's nothing, so
okay.
I also still from my side.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful.
I mean, I followed the presentation once again in the past. All my questions I think are answered, but yeah, from the group, anyone else? It's your turn.
Okay. Okay, so I stop sharing. Looking through the screen. Okay, so let's wrap up.
Sure. I think also that if the group someone wrote a very nice comment there. It was some tool, awesome tool and presentation. Thank you for making this. So
thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. I guess that maybe also people will review it again, and if they have questions, they can always contact us at meetup.com in our group, or directly probably to you. But we totally
of course.
We're totally happy to.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, I was just mentioning it's easy to create an account. Is free. You can walk through the user interface. You will have the links to the documentation. You can download the examples that I shown you. So everything is available. Just go to daxoptimizer.com, create an account, and you can try by yourself.
Great, super. Jan, if you would like to post again the link here, but I think it's also the presentation, so it's quite easy. Jan's writing, is there a trial? So
yeah. So
basically, you said you can create an account for free. So is it kind of a trial or?
Yes. Yeah. So let me explain. So you have the ability to create an account, and you can actually enter the system, and you can view the analysis performed on the sample models that you can also download. So you can download the PBX file. You can see the problem. You can see everything. What is not available for free is the analysis of your model, because if you think for a moment, once you analyze your model, you're pretty much done. So, you know, the first run, the first analysis is where you have more value. We are trying to think what we could do to, you know, simplify the use, but actually we try to do as much as we can. So you can actually try with other models. We have sample models that you can test, that you can see. If we analyze your model and we provide a solution, there is not much else we can do after that. So that's the problem of the trial. So we cannot just try on your model because that will be providing you already the final product. So we don't understand how to create a meaningful trial experience on your model. And so actually guiding the people on a model that we created, it makes it easy because we can explain what is happening. Whereas on your model, we will not be able to explain your model. So you can interpret your model, but actually once you have the suggestion for your model, you're pretty much consuming the entire experience. So that's the reason why we don't have a trial in the common sense that I try with my model, because usually we don't think that, yes, it is true that you can make DAX Optimizer part of your development cycle, but actually you could also use DAX Optimizer one spot consumption, you run it once and that's it. And that's what you need. If that's what you need, you just get what you want. So we will remove that value if we provide the first run for free. That's the problem. If someone has a good idea for suggesting a valuable way to create a trial experience, I would be happy to hear it.
So we will be waiting from the group for some suggestions then.
Sorry?
But we would be waiting from the group any suggestions for this kind of recommendations for the trial.
Because we thought about that for months. We didn't find a sustainable way that can actually work. That's the problem.
Understandable, absolutely. So we would like to thank Marco and the group too. So Marco, it was a pleasure to have you once again here with us, and we hope that probably we can also host you again in the future. You are one of the most well-known contributors to the Power BI community, so I think I would totally encourage also to the group to have a look in your books or any other publications that actually you have. And of course, if you have any questions, I would suggest to the group to reach out to us via meetup.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Have a nice evening.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.